On today's show, are the Cleveland Cavaliers going to get it done in Game 5? We're going to preview Friday's game on today's Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and it is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. I'm Chris Manning, that's Evan Dammarrell. Jake Stevens is back on production. Go stream his new album right now, wherever you get your music. And
it's a great title.
Thus, you can find it. People can check out all Locked On shows wherever you get your podcasts, and we're going to get you ready for Cavs Magic. So check out Locked On Magic if you have not already. Today's three things that are going to decide Game 5. And Evan, I think we have to start with Jarrett Allen, and if he's going to play or not, and if he does play with his rib issue, a contusion on his ribs, which sounds very painful, and I'm sure is very painful. What can he even give you? So that I think is the number one thing. It's just, does the Cavs probably most consistent player of this series, is he able to go?
So if he's able to go and it's not going to compromise things, I think, yeah, you can rock it. I mean, shoot, he's your leading rebounder, second leading scorer heading into Game 5. Those numbers could have changed just based on that, but whatever. Yeah, getting Jarrett Allen back, if he's 100% and this rib injury isn't going to impact play, is, significant. Especially now that Orlando is without Gary Harris, they might have to start Jonathan Isaac in his place. Well, we don't know if Gary Harris will or will not play, but he missed most of the Game 5 with a hamstring injury. But jumping back to Allen, it all depends on how he's feeling and how that rib is doing. And I think the issue is just because of his position, how physical this series has been. If that rib doesn't feel 100%, and sure, he can wear protective padding or like the equivalent of like the Kevlar vests that NFL players wear, it's going to be a liability, because if you get hit once, like, it's going to continue to hurt. And then you get hit constantly, like with how physical this series has been. I don't want to say Allen will be a liability, but like his impact just won't be as, I guess, impactful, robust, comparatively to like if he's at 100%. And also, you just don't want him to re-aggravate or just worsen the injury as well, just because it can be tricky, because it can be a cartilage or a tissue thing down there. Just there's so much. So you kind of have to just be cautious about it. And I think, at least for now, if you're Cleveland, you would game plan with the assumption that Allen isn't going to play, just because you're erring on the side of caution. And also, like I said, even if he's like, let's say 85 to 90 to 95%, that 5% can still be a variance that may not be worth it, because if he gets hit once or twice in that same spot, it could just re-aggravate and irritate things and just kind of have Cleveland lose like that rebounding edge that they developed when Allen is on the court.
Yeah, I can't imagine he goes. It's really the thing.
It's so tricky because it was a sudden thing, and it happened in the fourth Game 4, and he played through it. So you'd have to assume that maybe something flared up in practice, or it just wasn't getting better in the several days the Cavs had off. But I just think you really should tread lightly with this and just give Allen the luxury to recover, especially if you're able to kind of exploit different things with like playing smaller and having Evan Mobley at the 5.
I think just if you're thinking just about Allen functioning and just your team being functional as a result around him, right? If he's not right, then what are you getting out of it? What are you getting from him? I don't think you know how much you really can get out of him. I think on top of that, the way you look in Game 4, or Game 5, with the spacing with Mobley at the 5, like that worked. I would just say, look at that. Think about Allen's just what he can give you. If he's in a lot of pain and has a rib issue and can't bump and grind in what has turned into a very physical series, and you know you're going to get physicality from Mo Wagner and everyone that Orlando's going to throw at you. What are you actually going to be able to get out of Allen? And maybe he could go. I think if it's game 7, all hands on deck, I think that could be a little bit different. But I think game 6, particularly if he's in a lot of pain and it's going to take him, so just roll with what you have. Maybe just run the same starting 5. We could say, like, okay, maybe do you want to start Marcus Morris? Do you want to keep Okoro in there? Whatever you want to do. But I think just unless you know Allen is close to 100%, I just can't imagine he is. I think he probably doesn't play, and I think the Cavs they'll be okay, just considering how functional they looked against Orlando in game 5.
Yeah, they looked functional without him on the court. Of course, you'd like to have him just because Orlando has an injury at first, but the closer you are to full strength, the better off you are. And Orlando's a place Cleveland has yet to win in this series, and having that edge, it's just having that extra body, whether it's just for a morale situation or just his defensive ability, because Allen has been arguably the best player for Cleveland in this series. Yeah, you have that impact, but also you don't want to compromise things for the sake of winning a game 6 and rushing into the second round. If you can afford to ride the storm, even if it's an ugly grinded out win where it's back and forth the entire time, like it was in game 5, as you had noted, whether it's starting Isaac Okoro or just playing more smaller ball lineups to begin to kind of exploit Orlando's size and make them move a bit more on defense. There's levers the Cavs can pull to make Orlando uncomfortable. And at the same juncture, that doesn't require Jared Allen to do it. So yeah, I would assume he doesn't play. We'll get an update probably the day of the game on just what his status will be, and then have more clarity Friday night when the Cavs play the Magic. But yeah, it's just this weird holding pattern until we kind of know how he's doing physically and everything. But just based on what I saw in game 5, he wasn't doing much cheering or celebrating. And for those who don't know, when you have a rib injury, it's just painful to breathe. It's painful to, and for a human being that large who took a pretty heavy blow for another human being that's just as large as him in the fourth quarter, it probably hurts quite a bit for Allen. And if he can play through it, that's great. But also, it could just be ultimately intolerance thing for him, and he doesn't feel right. The Cavs aren't going to risk it.
Would you start Okoro again, or would you start Morris?
Talk about this more just when it comes to the offense, because there's a couple guys that could be a factor, but I think I'd start Morris just because Orlando really struggled at defending that smaller lineup, especially in the fourth quarter. I think there's a lot of just comfort out there, despite Morris seldom playing for Cleveland in his time here. And plus, he's just a low maintenance dude. He doesn't need the ball in his hands. And I think just, that physicality he can bring and a little bit of that grit and spark could be really beneficial to kind of help set the tone and get rolling in a hostile environment where, again, the Cavs have yet to win. What do you?
I would probably just keep consistent. I think having Okoro's defense, and I think you'd expect a better shooting game from him. I'm cool with that. But I think if the game gets really physical in a certain way early and you need to shift, I think you could just go to Morris and keep things consistent. I mean, I think Morris played more minutes than Okoro and Karis LeVert. Anyway, and he came off the bench last game, so I think you could see something similar there if the game breaks a certain way. I certainly would, if I was going to, I would say I would start Okoro, but then Morris would be option 2, and then LeVert would be the one I don't want any part of for this game. Just keep him on the bench and keep him doing what he's doing. All right, after this, can the Cavs be the team they've been at home on the road? First time all series. What can you actually trust what this team's going to do? We'll debate that, talk about that up next. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time actually go down closer it gets to the tip. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. There are last-minute deals. You could save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. There are zone deals where you can save even more when you choose a section and like Game Time choose the seats. And there's all-in pricing. Toggling this feature shows you the total up front, meaning no surprise fees at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use our code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms apply. Create an account. Redeem our code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Okay, back. Evan, do you think that Game 5 and the way it went, does that give you any more confidence that the Cavs aren't going to look the way they did in those previous games in Orlando going into this next game?
I don't know. The way we saw how Cleveland played in Game 1 and Game 2, I felt very comfortable saying that they were going to sustain that level of play in Game 3, and then we saw what happened. And then you saw them have a pulse for the first half of Game 4, and then get steamrolled in the second half of Game 4. So there's just too much variance and too much noise surrounding this. But I think, like, yeah, in terms of just like confidence, if you're the Cavs, you really got punked, you got demoralized in those two games. And so being able to maybe pick up that win is super important if you're Cleveland. But other than that, like, no, it's just you reset and your focus is to go 1-0 again. And if you close out this series, great. But I don't know. There's just too much noise, I guess, just because when the Cavs were riding super high, I thought like, oh, this maybe could be like a best of 5 or like the Cavs win in 5 scenario, or maybe they even sweep, God willing. But Orlando showed some grit. They dug deep and they enjoyed the confines of home for them, and I need to see it before I can actually believe it, I guess, at this point.
Welcome to that's a very Chris Manning place to be, and I respect it. I agree with you. Like, I need to see them not like
4 almost 5 years together. They say couples start to pick up each other's habits over time.
Yeah, you don't need any of my habits. They need to just like play a complete. I will believe that they can like play a good game in Orlando when the final buzzer sounds and they've won.
Well, they could even not even play a good game in Orlando and they won, but like as long as they win, I think that's all that matters. So
yeah, but I think if they play with the energy, they like there's a different. You could have like a bad game and win, but because your energy's good, you kind of get it through. If they play it all like they did in games 3 and 4. I'll see you Sunday. Like you're getting a game 7. I kind of think we're getting a game 7 regardless. I think the margin on these teams is still pretty thin. I mean, game 5, even though the Cavs did win, and it was close late. Like it took a really great Evan Mobley block, one of the biggest plays of his career, if not the biggest, for them to win that game. It took some certain things breaking correctly for that to go that way. The series has been close. It's been competitive. That was the first like close game we've actually had. I kind of just think we're getting game 7, but I think it's possible the Cavs win if the energy they have is like if it's closer to game 5 than it is game 4, which was entirely unserious, or game 3, which was also entirely unserious. Like you can't have those games 3 or 4 if you want to come back, I think. Or if you want to just get this, like if you want any chance of winning, you can't have that poor energy.
Well, somewhat. In game 5, red hot, scored 33 points, looked very, very good. Garland had 17 in the first quarter, which I believe either or matched something LeBron did. So it's off to you, Darius Garland. But then they proceeded to score 15 points in the second quarter, which is the second least amount of points they've scored in an individual quarter in this series. And you're thinking, oh, great. The Cavs came out too hot. They were like really just, jazzed up so quickly. And then like the energy just fizzled out. Like it's that just weird, like constant theme where they can't consistently string together 4 quarters of just complete basketball. And sure, in the second half, they came out strong, especially in the third quarter. I think they really went low with Orlando. And yes, they get outscored in the fourth quarter, but they did just enough to hold on to the win. But they can't afford to have any of those slip-ups in any of these frames of the game. I think maybe in the first you're afforded more of that luxury because you have more time to correct. You can't have any moment where you take your foot off the gas or you feel comfortable or you feel complacent, or if you do any of those things, yeah, it could lead to a game 7. And I think The problem is just like when you look at how things have gone in Orlando, like game 3, you can probably just toss that one in the trash, just because they were bad across the entire spectrum. Game 4 came out really strong in the first half, putting on 37 in the second, and then only were able to muster 10 points in the third quarter, which is like one of the most pathetic performances I've seen Cleveland put up. So you can't afford to go into those lulls or just those periods where things just aren't falling and you just need to execute your game plan. And according to the Cavs, that's playing faster, that's playing with a sense of urgency, but obviously being like aggressive and not reckless or careless. And so if they capture some of that from game 5 and some of just the good things they've done all series long, yeah, I think a path to victory is more sustainable or realistic. It's just there's always just that voice in the back, the negative intrusive thought that has crept into everyone's head now is like they could have just a quarter or like a 5 to 7 minute stretch where they're just completely flat. In Orlando, riding the wave of being home, can just take that, grab the Cavs by the throat, and never let go.
Yeah, I think the difference is that when that happened, when they had that bad quarter in Cleveland, you saw them like fight back and push back and win the game.
Correct. They had their home crowd. Yeah. They had everything behind them at that point. It's a completely different beast in Orlando, and I want to see if they're able to respond from a bad stretch.
That's what I'm saying.
I think we're on the same.
Yeah, you got to actually do it. And like,
yeah,
after this round, if you want to like, I don't think their chance of advancing beyond like, into the conference finals are super high. But if you want to like,
well, Kristaps,
if you want any,
is like dead.
Yeah, but even you can't. Boston's going to be harder to play in than Orlando. You know what I mean? Like this is supposed to be like the Orlando. Their fans are awesome. I'm glad they showed up. This is going to be the easier of the two environments to play in. I think you got to just like this is just like another test case of like how normal are the Cavs. If the Cavs are normal, I think they'll go back and not be quite as spooked. They already just showed that they have some pride, I think, in coming back home and winning the way they did. I think you got to follow it up in Orlando and not look the same way. Like if they look overwhelmed again, like just maybe like end the game at halftime, get everyone healthy, and like go home. You don't actually do that, but it's like if we're gonna, I think we're gonna know at some point, kind of early in that game, like what the energy's like, and what the Cavs' effort level's like. I think
Chris
we knew early,
channeling his inner Dirk Nowitzki, saying, "Shut it down, let's go home." After he sees like bad lull, he's like, "All right, shut it down, let's go home." Orlando wins the lowest scoring game in NBA history.
All right, after this, last thing, Cavs offense. Numbers from Game 5 about how the Cavs got a little hot. Can they replicate that? Is there something in there that can hold up another game? Which it's all it really needs to do. That's coming up after this. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You already talked about that, but there's so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. Unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel boards with, hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. And a ton include their own unique minigames like digging for treasure or a robot Pinchico machine. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. Okay, so two numbers I want to shout out from the Cavs Magic Game 5. Number one, Cavs did not turn the ball over barely at all. 10.5% turnover rate, pretty good. They're going to need to do that again. Secondly, short mid-range, they shot 57%, not a high volume, but they made their opportunities there. And then lastly, so it's really three numbers, not two. 57 0.1% on corner threes. Only 8% of their shots. So again, not high volume, but two areas the Cavs did not take a lot of shots in, but made a lot of their shots that made a difference in game 5 were those two spots, corner threes and in the 4 to 14 foot range. I'm curious to see how they can replicate that again. It boosted their 3-point numbers. They were 29% on non-corner threes in game 5. I think you'll need more from Mitchell. I think another big Garland game will be good. This was obviously a close game. The free throw advantage obviously went to Orlando. They had a much higher free throw rate. So there's some mess in these offensive numbers, I think. But for the Cavs, can they hit in those same spots again? And if they can't, which, those numbers are pretty high, pretty good, where can they make up for it, I think is an open question. And maybe, Evan, it's as simple as, hey, Isaac Okoro shoots a little better, and that helps or something. They're just going to need they're going to need something here to break right if they're going to get this done in 6.
Yeah, it's going to be the shooting stuff. I also think it's going to be rebounding, especially if Jared Allen doesn't play. Like, Orlando won the rebounding margin in game 5 at like 4 or 5 boards, I think, and they rebound by committee, and the Cavs are trying to maintain that approach with Devin Mobley being the fulcrum of it, and then trickling down from the rest there. But I would expect Donovan Mitchell to get his numbers. I think the Magic are going to make him work for it. I do wonder if not having Gary Harris kind of changes the dichotomy of things. And also, how is Mitchell physically as well? Like, he grimaced a little bit and had a slight limp after his media availability when walking off the podium, after he banged knees with Wendell Carter Jr. in game 5. So is he kind of not 100% physically? Then that's where you really look at Darius Garland. You look at Max Strus, like you said, Isaac Okoro maybe taking shots. Sliver is probably going to be a factor in this as well. Golly, maybe even Sam Merrill gets a little bit more burnt too. But there's a path where this works, but I think it starts and ends with Garland, and then not too far behind him is Max Strus, who can give you a little bit of that secondary playmaking, rebounding, and grit, as you want to call it, the proverbial term for it. But it's the shooting mostly with Strus, and I think if he has confidence on his side again after a strong game 5, like, that helps quite a bit. And if you have those two rolling, it's really easier to quiet a very raucous and hostile crowd if you're able to kind of just hit those big shots, especially if your star player in Mitchell is getting most of the defensive attention.
Who's your Cavs X factor for this game?
Oh, golly, I think it's going to be Darius Garland. It's either Darius Garland or Evan Mobley, I want to say. I'm going to take 2, but I'm going to go more so with Garland just because he's been so one-note and unremarkable for the first 4 games, and then game really showed up. You could tell. I had shared this when we talked about game 5. Like, he was pretty frustrated talking about the fact that, like, he hasn't been aggressive enough, he hasn't been shooting enough, and it's like JB Bickerstaff telling him, like, we need you to do more, or Marcus Morris Sr. saying, like, you can be special if you're a little bit more selfish with the basketball at times. It's a balancing act. If you get that same performance from Garland, who maybe has a little bit more confidence, maybe has used the first 4 games to kind of feel out how Orlando's defending him, and just more than anything, like, pay attention to him on the court, like, it'll unlock a lot of things for the Cavs. What about you?
I think it's Mitchell. Like, I understand, like, that's the obvious one, but it's like
it's a valid one.
It's like it's the obvious one because he's the best player on the team, and you would think, like, a road closeout game, you want your best player to step up. It's just he's had the last couple games have not been his best playoff games. That's just the fact. And whether he's banged up, whether it's the coverage, whatever it is. Last game, 9 of 23. Game before that, 5 of 14. Game before that, 6 of 16. Game before that, 9 of 12. He has only shot 50% or better once in the series. That was in game 1. He has not had, he's had his high in the series is 30, which was game 2 when he did some work at the line and hit some threes. He's not had a great 3-point shooting game in the series. His 3-point numbers in the series: 3 of 12, 3 of 8, 2 of 10, 1 of 6, 1 of 4, and 1 of 7. Not good. He's had one game above 30% in this series, and that was game 2.
Yeah.
Game one. He's gonna have to get hot at some point in these playoffs. The Cavs are gonna go as far as I think they would like to, but I think a closeout game, if Mitchell hits some threes, looks good, and he can be the closeout guy, this is why you get Donovan Mitchell. You want him to put his foot down in this big game, as cliched as it is.
And I wonder if it's a little easier now that it's just Jalen Suggs. I think Cole Anthony is going to be a bit of a pest. Fultz too, but like Gary Harris was really like defending Donovan Mitchell very well all throughout this series, and if they don't have him for Game 6, like that could be a bit of an X factor in itself. And also, to your point, like it's a great pick. Just saying, like Donovan Mitchell can be the X factor because he definitely can. Because it could segue into him getting hot, finding comfort on the floor again after just kind of being, badgered and bludgeoned and other words that are spicy to describe how he's been defended. But like he's worked for every single shot, and if he can have a little bit more of breathing room, a little bit more of luxury, like yeah, he could put his foot down and really have like an in fact playoff game. And more importantly, like really start to wash off the stink that he is a first round choke artist after the last 3 playoff runs have gone for him, this one not included.
All right, should we make picks? You have a feeling on who's actually going to win this one? I already kind of said I think this is going 7. I think we'll get another close game in 6. I
will have to explain to my wife, mother, and mother-in-law why I have to work on Mother's Day.
That's right. This is Mother's Day on Sunday. Well, my mom's birthday is next week, so that's kind of like when I celebrate my mom. Well, my mom's birthday is 2 weeks, but we're doing something for her birthday next Saturday. So if the Cavs play next Saturday, I will not be available. Just a heads up, telling you now.
Take notice, Cavs. But
well,
yeah.
They don't give a damn.
Okay. Well, either way, I think would I be surprised if Cleveland won? A little bit, but would I be totally surprised? No. And I also just think that Orlando will give as much as they can emotionally because it's all on the line for them, and I think they're going to go all out. And I just think this is a series that's going to go to 7, and it's going to be that ugly grind that many people expected. And maybe this is what the Cavs wanted, but Boston's waiting, and once they wrap up at 7, they'll move from there. Assuming Boston closes out, of course.
Boston's going to close, even if it's not in 5. Boston, I think, is going to event with or without
the program. Joe Kohler called my dumb other term for donkey take on the Heat winning in 6, and yeah, I'm really feeling that one right now. So
yeah, do you remember me being like borderline? I was borderline apoplectic when you hinted at that on the show, which isn't unusual for me. But you were wild.
I felt really good about that after the Heat won. I was like really like patting my own back after Miami took a game, so I was just like,
no, took an abnormally good Heat shooting game for that to even happen, and guess what's happened since?
Yeah, they probably missed Max Strus, but alrighty, well,
miss Jimmy Butler. Well, so here's people know. Here's our plan. We'll have a recap up for you, regardless of what happens after Game 6, Friday and Saturday. Cover that game. We'll see where it goes from there. Thanks again for listening. Thanks again to Jake Stevens. Have a great Friday, everyone. Thursday, Friday, whenever we're putting this up.